The Israeli government uncovered a very complex Hamas terror operation in Europe. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us from the foreign desk in Los Angeles. Lisa, reports from the Israel intelligence agency Mossad and Israeli Defense Forces revealed that Hamas was acting to expand its violent activity to attack innocent civilians around the world?
Yeah, no surprise here that they have had, ample time to spread their message. Many years on working on this and spreading their jihadi message all throughout the world on every continent. We have seen several plots that have been foiled throughout Europe, in Africa, and of course, we're very worried that that would happen here in the United States as well. Already, we have seen some attempts, low-hanging fruit. Of course, these are one-offs and lone wolves, and we can call them all these different phrasings that we have for our counterterrorism operations here. But the point is that they want to attack around the world, and that is a very alarming message for most. I should say all countries around the world that are watching out for this, that know that they have a threat, that know they have populations inside the country that would carry out these types of events, and of course, getting help from the Israeli government to foil these plots. Of course, Israel is keeping an eye on these threats 24/7. They have to because where there's a will, there's a way, and these terrorists do get through. And until the Iran regime is in power and funding these plots, they will continue, and the threat will continue to be there.
Now, the chairman of Hamas's political bureau called on Muslims around the world to build on the victory of October the 7th and to engage financial jihad. How would that look, Lisa? How would that actually work?
It's horrific because we've heard these threats, right? Throughout the years. We've heard many of these threats from Hezbollah, from Hamas, from Iran's regime, from Al Qaeda, from ISIS, etc. But now it's as if the useful idiots and ignorant people around the world have become partner and in cahoots with these terrorists. So when we hear these threats, we actually are alarmed because they do have partners in crime here, and that's why we see so much of the boycotting. We see the protests here in Los Angeles. We've seen them in New York. We see them in Chicago. We see them in Toronto, where they're actually out on the streets praising October 7th, praising Hamas, praising Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda, and anything that goes against Canada, the United States, Europe. Why are you living in these free and democratic places if that is how you feel? Go to Iran's regime, go to Gaza, go to the West Bank, go to where they will embrace you and your jihadism. And that is why it is so alarming to see so much of the sentiment, whether it's on college campuses, in Congress here in the United States, we see some of this sentiment, of course, on social media, where so many of these cowards can hide and tweet and say whatever they want. But of course, a wake up call to all of us.
So I guess a lot of people are sending money then to support a lot of these protesters.
Both sending money, of course, funding in the sense of raising money and putting money and efforts towards this. They are looking for recruits. Remember, there's always been this race to get recruits out in the West by ISIS and Al Qaeda and Hamas and Hezbollah, all in competition with one another to get recruits. And of course, in boycotting, meaning if you're against Israel, if you're against the United States, if you're against companies that are actually friendly towards Israel and the United States, they want you to boycott those companies as well. Right now, circulating on social media are competing lists of companies that the jihadists want you to boycott because they are taking sides with the hostages. God forbid they should call for innocent hostages to be released. That they're showing sympathy for October 7th. Boycotting actors and actresses and influencers and soccer players and makeup companies and coffee companies and other things like that. So they actually want to make this a global movement to show their solidarity with Hamas, with going against, of course, Israel, the United States, anyone who sides with Israel, the aftermath of October 7th.
Now let's talk about that Israeli soccer player who was arrested in Turkey for honoring the hostages being held by Hamas. After he scored a goal, he apparently held up his hand that was bandaged. I saw the video of that, and with a very supportive message inscribed on it to release the hostages.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to think that no one in their everyone in the world should be supporting this idea of releasing the hostages, including Palestinians. If you care about the Gazans, if you want a ceasefire, if you want an end to all of this, why wouldn't you call for the release of innocent hostages? There are babies being held by Hamas. There are young women who have been raped, who have had the most horrific experience. Old men. I have interviewed the family of one of those old men who turned 85 in captivity. Uh, it's horrific to think that you're not allowed to support the idea of innocent hostages being released by a terror organization. And this player used the opportunity as the 100th day of their captivity, held up his hand in solidarity where he had written that, and of course got kicked off the team, has been arrested, and is now being interrogated by Turkish officials.
Unbelievable. Lisa, lawyers for Israel presented their case of South Africa's claim that Israel is guilty of genocide in Gaza at the International Court of Justice. Now, the defense team says it is a grossly distorted story and that Israel is the real genocide victim here, following the murder of more than 1,200 people in southern Israel on October the 7th.
This is the same group of people. It's funny that they even have the word justice in the title of their acronymed organization, but the same group that refused to watch the footage from October 7th, meaning they're denying that it even happened. If you're not willing to watch the evidence, then you're just denying that it happened. This is connected to the United Nations that has given the Iran regime honorary positions on women's rights committees and human rights committees, and now they want to school Israel on genocide. Genocide against Hamas, an actual terror organization that has genocide in its charter. And when they were questioned as to why they're not bringing Hamas to this court of justice, they said, well, Hamas is not a state. We can't really bring them. So now the burden falls on Israel. Israel is being called to the court of justice. And I hate to keep saying that and giving them that kind of clout because they're defending themselves, because they have the audacity to want to fight off an existential threat. It's truly mind-boggling, so much hypocrisy, and really, it's so damaging to the actual genocides that have occurred on the global stage, that continue to occur on the global stage, and that have no no there is no attention paid to them. There is no justice that is brought about, and no one talks about them. So it seems as though the world is obsessed and consumed by the idea of fighting Israel, fighting Zionism in whatever capacity they can.
Lisa, the Houthi rebels threatened a strong and effective response after the U.S. military carried out another strike in Yemen overnight. Now, many feel this is further ratcheting up tensions as Washington has vowed to protect shipping from attacks by the Iran-aligned movement.
Yeah, this is continuing to escalate, something that, of course, the Biden administration does not want. Of course, nobody wants to be dragged into another war, a war that looks like it would be called World War III. And many people are asking me, is that where this is headed? A lot of things to connect here. Of course, as much as the White House wants to keep this separate from what is going on in Israel, unfortunately, we cannot do that. This is being all orchestrated by the same puppeteer, Iran's regime that is pushing the buttons, whether it's by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon that is firing into northern Israel, whether it's Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad that the Iran regime continues to support to fire into Israel, to keep those hostages, to continue its reign of terror, or the Houthis, which are it's Iran's proxy inside Yemen that has been fighting Saudi Arabia as a proxy, that has been fighting and firing at ships coming through, whether they're from the United States or not, by the way. And we see that that has taken a toll on global trade and ships passing through that region as well. So this will continue to escalate. And in terms of timing, Iran's regime, of course, knows that the Biden administration, which spent 3 years whining and dining and coddling Iran's regime, begging for a deal, has one more year in office, and they don't take them seriously. They know that they are averse to any confrontation, to any escalation, and of course, they would love to use diplomacy as any means possible to get rid of this pesky little mosquito called Iran's regime. Look, the United States has no choice but to fire back right now, but they're trying to do it in a very targeted way that, again, de escalates the situation and not to cause further escalation. Iran's regime, on the other hand, has a very different idea, I think, different plan going forward. And that's why we're really on their time. We are watching their plot unfold, and we're watching the United States react to their plan.
Search and rescue operations are underway to find a couple of U.S. Navy sailors who disappeared off the coast of Somalia. They were first reported missing on Thursday night while conducting operations off the coast of Somalia, Lisa.
Yeah, very, very unfortunate. Of course, teams are out there. We don't know anything more than that. They do not want to release information about their names or any specific characteristics because of that security threat. But they are still missing as of this morning. And again, rescue teams out there, but we do not have further detail. We know that they were out there on a research and intel assignment, and that is when they went missing.
You know, we've seen the protests in Germany recently with farmers bringing their tractors and other heavy equipment, blocking major roadways, protesting the German government, suspending subsidies for agricultural producers. Where do we stand right now in that situation?
This is a very interesting situation to watch. We saw this in the Netherlands as well. They were actually more successful than the German farmers will be, unfortunately. As of this morning, 10,000 farmers hit these protests, coming out with their tractors in protest, as you said, cut subsidies, had to do more with diesel tax than anything else. And the government came out this morning and said, "We support you. We want to show you respect going forward, but we're telling you right now, we've got no money." So they basically said, "Sorry, we can't do anything about it, but we want to respect you and your position." Um, Obviously, it's all about the money. It's about the economy. It's about the farmers being able to sustain themselves. So I don't think this very kind "sorry, we can't" will go far with the farmers, but we shall see what will happen. But as of right now, the government let them down easy and let them know that they have no wiggle room to take back those or to provide those subsidies once again.
And I was reading some of the signs in German that said specifically, remember, we bring the food to your table. So, I mean, that's pretty important, absolutely. Lisa, Texas has been busing migrants crossing the border into the state to sanctuary cities for a while now. Thousands have been taken out of Texas and bused to cities like Chicago, New York. Since April of 2022, more than 100,000 foreign nationals who have illegally crossed the border have been bussed out. And now New York City Mayor Eric Adams says, hey, we're declaring a state of emergency. We can't handle the influx of these 37,000 who've been sent to the Big Apple here.
Right. It's interesting to watch this really unfold because, as we all know, it wasn't a humanitarian cause to take in all of these migrants that the country cannot absorb, letting them sleep on the streets, letting them get sick or bring in disease, letting them get raped, letting them drown, all of these things that these poor migrants have to go through, and then putting the burden on American cities to absorb them. Well, states like Texas said, we're not a sanctuary state. But if you are a sanctuary state and you are, so proud of your position on immigration, we will give these migrants to you. And that's exactly how it went down. And that's why you're seeing such a change of heart in these major cities that wanted to be sanctuary cities, but now see that they just cannot absorb the sheer numbers. You're looking at places like Los Angeles, like Chicago, like New York, getting the majority of these migrants and not being able to house them. So we're seeing a lot of displacement. We're seeing a lot of homelessness that is increasing. And again, not a problem that we want to add to. And it looks like we will have to have a reevaluation, especially with the sanctuary cities. But the blue cities have to understand that it's one thing to want to do something. It's one thing to actually apply those practices in reality and to watch these human lives that will either be displaced, be affected by it, be affected by the crime, be affected by the poverty, the pollution, everything else, and of course the migrants themselves. This is not a humanitarian act, and of course we're seeing it in real time unfold in our country.
Let's talk about the red team for just a moment here and the potential GOP candidate, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Donald Trump, of course. Who's the front runner right now, Lisa? What are your thoughts?
It's still Donald Trump. It's still Donald Trump. It's interesting. We're starting our primaries here in the United States, and a lot of Republicans are anything but Donald Trump, and a lot of Republicans are not. They won't even look at the other candidates, and it's only Donald Trump. Nikki Haley has made a thrust forward. Ron DeSantis, many people thought he would do much better than he has been doing. But a lot of people that I speak to think he is the best alternative because he does bring a lot of the policies and a lot of that non-political class approach that Donald Trump offers, but with a fresh start. He's done well for Florida. They believe he could do well for the country, and others believe that he just didn't bring the charisma that they thought he would bring. Yeah, Nikki Haley being, of course, a woman, a migrant or immigrant family, I should say, an American dream story, and of course, a woman. She's done very well at the UN. She's done well in her speaking engagements, but people feel that she would be actually a wonderful running mate with Donald Trump. Others feel that she would do well on her own. A lot of center and left of center Democrats that are turning on the Democrat Party are actually turning to Nikki Haley. I've interviewed a handful of them this week in Los Angeles, actually. A lot of donors that actually were donating to the Biden campaign have now turned and are focusing on Nikki Haley as a great choice. So we shall see. It will get very interesting, Hal, and I know we'll continue to talk about it as we go forward.
Political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
Of course.